Hey there. Today I'm going to take a deeper look at my current roster that I'm running and break down each part of it from the characters down to the crisis cards. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. I would like to think of myself as an above average gamer, but not too much higher when it comes to playing this game at least. Although we've only got to have 2 events before our local game store had to close because of the pandemic, I place pretty well, and I'd like to think I'm decent at this game in part because I probably spend way too much time thinking about it. I say this because while I have put a pretty decent bit of thought into my list and the different parts of it, it is by no means a list that is meant to dominate at a table or an event, but to have some good synergies and game plans going into a mission. And I have been handily beat by lists and ideas that have never even crossed my mind, which shows just how much space this game has to grow, which is awesome. Without further ado, let's talk about my A&W Rootbeer list. That is to say, I'm running Avengers with the possibility of Wakanda. I have Captain America along with Captain Marvel, Vision, Thor, Okoye, Black Panther with Shuri and Killmonger, and rounding out the roster is Valkyrie and MODOK. My 18 tactic cards are Avengers Assemble, Wakanda Forever, Usurp the Throne, Patch Up, Brace for Impact, Advanced R&D, Drop Off, and Disarm. Before I get into the crisis cards, I want to talk about what my list wants to be doing. My bread and butter is playing with the Avengers for 4 reasons. The first is the flexibility within the affiliation. It has a range of great characters in the affiliation that are good for different jobs. The second is the power efficiency. The discount from Captain America's leadership is something that helps the team as a whole be more streamlined and allow for some great turn 1 plays as well. 3 is throws, and 4 is really I just like the Avengers a lot. They have a wide array of characters that can throw other characters for consistent damage and secure objective holding, and have just a wide selection of characters to play with. Not to mention they're the heroes of the story. The core of any of my list that is 17 threat or higher is Thor and Captain America. From there, I will begin to build based a little bit more on the scenario. If I'm playing the Wakandan herbs, then Black Panther will come in along with either Vision or Captain Marvel, depending on the secure objective. Otherwise, on a 17 threat mission, I have Thor and Captain America, with the 8 other points being rounded out with some combination of Killmonger, Danvers, and Vision. Which of these 3 I take will be based on how many size 3 terrain pieces there are for Vision and Marvel to throw, if my opponent has higher threat models like a Thor or MODOK, or maybe a bunch of 4s for Killmonger to hunt, as well what the secure crisis is. Marvel will trump Vision on origin bombs, for example, while Killmonger can thrive on an objective like extremist consoles, where teams are more spread out and he can easily charge into a situation for a solo kill. At 18 points, I currently do the same thing, but have the added bonus of being able to put MODOK into the lineup, but as soon as Hawkeye comes out, he'll probably be replacing MODOK in the roster in the 18-point mission, as I will then be able to run the same core of Thor and Cap, along with Valkyrie, Shuri, and Hawkeye. But I won't dive too deep down that rabbit hole yet, because Barton isn't quite here in the States. At 19 threat, though, I will run Cap, Thor, and Vision alongside Valkyrie and Shuri. This is in part because I know at 19 threat we will be playing the Panic Civilians objective that you can pay 6 power to rescue a civilian for 2 instant victory points. So Shuri and Vision are great for this because they very easily can gain an excess of power, and Valkyrie because she is a very well-rounded 3-threat character who, once she has enough power on her, becomes a must-answer threat to my opponent that also has the benefit of having a charge and a throw. Then at 20 threat, I will run a variation of my 17-point team, adding in usually Shuri for her rerolls, but sometimes Valkyrie, depending on what I see my opponent has in their roster and what the secure objective is. At 15 points, I do something drastically different and play the Wakandans with Panther, Killmonger, and Shuri, and then either Vision or Captain Marvel. Vision is the more likely pick as he does really well on Gamma Shelters with his beam attack, but again, he isn't great at origin bombs, so that is where Marvel will pop in. The reason for the change up at 15 is because there isn't nearly as many important game pieces on the board at 15 points, so Wakanda Forever becomes that much more potent. It includes Black Panther if that 15 is for Wakandan herbs, and Panther is one of the better runners for that crisis with his long move and pounce ability. If the 15 is Gamma Waves, Vision, Shuri, and Black Panther all have ways of moving characters outside of the range 2 of the Gamma Shelter, and again, because of the usually lower model count on both sides, Killmonger becomes a very dangerous character round 2 when he has enough power to charge in for 2 attacks, backed with Shuri's rerolls. Alright, so that breaks down the characters and what I'm looking at for the different threat levels. Let's take a look at what I think is the hardest area to narrow down in the team tactic cards. There are so many great options here, but these are the ones that I like and why I think they fit with what I'm trying to do. Avengers Assemble, I feel like this one doesn't need too much explaining. Positioning in this game is huge. That short distance can be the difference between Cap being in range to bodyguard someone, maybe holding an objective, or not. Thor being able to get a for Asgard off, or not. There are just a lot of different options with this card that can open up doors, and if 75% of my roster is Avengers, it's coming in. Similarly, with Wakandan Forever is probably the best affiliation card in the game, and having the added benefit of Killmonger getting a 3rd attack, and Panther and Shuri each having a push attached to this attack, just makes it a must-take for any 15-point mission for me. Along those lines, the last character-specific, affiliation-specific card I have is Usurp the Throne. Even if Killmonger doesn't make it onto the game table, my opponent has to be wary of what they can bring into the game, and even more so if Killmonger does hit the table, he creates a bubble that your opponent will want to avoid with their Thor or other key model that Killmonger can hunt for. Really, it just takes Killmonger up a tier when he has access to this card, so if Killmonger comes in, so does Usurp. The other 5 are all cards that give access to an ability that otherwise I would not have from my characters. So Patch Up, eventually this will probably be swapped out for Med Pack because often in my games my characters are spread out besides Cap and whoever he is bodyguarding. But really it is just nice to keep either an objective holder alive with Patch Up or demoralize an opponent by taking Thor from 5 damage down to none. Healing is something very nice to always have on hand. The only time my healing card may not make it into my 5 is on Extremis consoles where I will already have access to some healing, and if I'm hard-pressed to fit in other characters like Brace for Impact. For a while, Brace for Impact I thought would be an auto-include in my 5 for every single game, and while I think it should always be in your roster, I no longer think it has to crack that 5 every time. With the Guardians getting more and more affiliated characters, they still don't have access to a lot of throws, and their game plan doesn't need to rely on them. Kind of the same with the Wakandan affiliation, they have no throws of their own either. So if I look across the table and see half their roster has a way to throw and are an affiliation like Avengers or Asgard, I bring Brace. If not, it leaves an extra option open for versatility for me to play with. But there will almost always be 1 or 2 throws from my opponent in a game, so it is almost never a completely dead card. A recent addition that has quickly become one of my favorite tactic cards that can easily be cut if it needs to be, but does very well in my typical playstyle of having a more elite squad that usually gets priority, is Disarm. This card is a wonderful piece to have because I usually cut under the 5 activation list to get priority, at which point I can disarm one of my opponent's heavy hitters like Thor, Valkyrie, or even Killmonger before my opponent can activate a single model. Then, with them not hitting very hard for a turn, I can make my first activation on the other side of the board, knowing any retribution on the other side is going to be significantly undercut. Additionally, Thor can combine this with a hammer throw to shock the disarmed character to really make their next activation much less impactful. This card doesn't always have to make it into the 5, but I haven't played it and found it to be underwhelming so far. And that is a big improvement over the card that Disarm replaced, which was Trip Up. Don't get me wrong, Trip Up is great, but you have to get damage through with the attack, so you usually want to go with a bigger attack, in which case there is a chance that you just outright daze the target, which feels like a waste of power and a tactic card. And if you don't do a big enough attack and the opponent's defense dice spike and you don't deal damage, again, a waste of power and a tactic card. Disarm has a longer range from where your team has to be, and it can be done at the very end of your turn to make sure it is played on the best target. The last 2 tactic cards though for me are Drop Off and Advanced R&D. Together they combine for a nasty turn 1 play involving Thor and Vision, but they are still 2 very powerful effects on their own. R&D is great when Vision or Shuri are on the field with their ample amounts of power they usually have banked to spread it out and make sure that the rest of the team is supplied. Especially when it can be used to guarantee that extra bit of power a character needs to get off 2 big attacks or have enough power to use a superpower. Drop Off is great because it opens up plays to get an easy turn 2 Wakandan herb score by having Vision or whomever to drop off Black Panther after he books it home after snagging the objective during round 1. As well, it is great with as many flyers as I typically can have on the board between Thor, Captain Marvel, and Vision. So keeping in mind what this list can thrive on, these are some of the objectives that I enjoy bringing. For my secures, I like Extremist Consoles, Origin Bombs, and Infinity Formula. Origin Bombs does well since I have 3 characters with 4 energy defense between Captain Marvel, Thor, and Captain America. Infinity Formula works well with Captain Marvel, giving her easy access to the extra power she needs for binary form, and will make for some great range 5 duels once Hawkeye comes out. I also enjoy the Extremist Consoles because it can force difficult situations onto my opponent, splitting up their forces to score points, while I can aggressively play the middle 2 points with the captains on one side and Thor and Vision on the other side most of the time. And if one side gets overwhelmed, they can fall back to my back objective, forcing more decision points on my opponent. The extraction crises I enjoy are Hammers, Citizen Evacuation, and Spider Infected. A little bit of a secret is I don't really like Spider Infected, so it's actually hardly ever chosen by me. But usually neither do my opponents, and I prefer to be able to pick the secures. So if my opponent doesn't have too much of a preference, this might be a crisis card that pushes them to let me have the blue objectives. Hammers, well, I like Hammers. It allows for my free attacks to have a lot more extra value. Thor gets another chance at a wild, Captain Marvel's rerolls on Energy Blast become that much more potent for every dice she's rolling, and Vision's beam attacks hitting harder on multiple characters just means more value. So this pushes on additional value where a character like Baron Zemo or Rocket don't gain as much value from the hammers as much as my characters can. As well, let's face it, it's also just really fun to be hitting harder on the table. And finally, Citizen Evac. This is another crisis that I really enjoy because it comes along with the extra decision points and can make for some really interesting games that make you think a bit more. I have stayed away from the Skrull and Kree Power Core missions because of how unreliable they are to obtain and then try to keep. But this wraps up my Rootbeer list of A and W. I hope you guys give it a try and let me know how it does for you whenever you can start getting games in again. If you would like to go over your current roster with me and talk about some strategy, feel free to message me on Facebook or shoot me an email. I have both of those down in the description below. I love all of the different theory crafting out there and would love to talk to you about what you're brewing. Thank you all for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end here. As I start doing some more tactical analysis videos again, I would like to know what you would like for me to cover. More unique plays, covering rosters, maybe just certain parts of the game, etc., etc. Let me know down in the comments below, and hopefully I can at least meet some of those requests. Anyways, that's all I have for this week, so thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.